Have you ever wondered what happens in the mind of a narcissist when the person they thought they had control over finally walks away and never looks back? It's not a loud event. There's no explosion, no dramatic ending, just silence, just absence. Just that one moment where you decide that you're done explaining yourself, done waiting to be valued, done being drained. And in that quiet, something powerful happens. Not to you, but to them. Because for the first time, they feel something they've spent their whole lives avoiding: powerlessness. Stay with this video until the very end, because what you'll learn about what really goes on in the narcissist's mind might just be the closure your heart has been craving. See, the act of walking away seems simple, but for the one who's been emotionally manipulated, gaslighted, and psychologically worn down, walking away is a battle. It's not just leaving a person, it's leaving behind everything you once believed. You believed they would change. You believed your love would be enough. You believed they saw you, heard you, understood you. And when all of that turned out to be a lie, something inside you began to break. But in that breaking, something stronger began to build, something unshakable. The kind of strength narcissists fear the most: independence. Because narcissists thrive on control. Not physical control, but emotional control. They want to know they can affect your mood with a single look. That they can twist your words, then blame you for the confusion. That they can pull you in, then push you away, and you'll keep crawling back, needing their approval like air. But when you finally stop needing them, their whole world begins to collapse. And the most terrifying part for them: you didn't scream, you didn't beg, you didn't explain, you just walked. That's what shatters them. Not your words, not your anger, your silence. Because in that moment, they realize they've lost their grip. The thing they fed off, your energy, your tears, your effort, it's gone. And they can't replace it. They can fake a new relationship, post a new face, find a new supply. But it won't feel the same. Because deep down, they know you are the one they didn't think would ever leave. Psychology tells us something fascinating. Those who are addicted to power feel the deepest fear when they sense real loss. Not the loss of a person, but the loss of their dominance. And that's what your departure represents. You've taken back your power. You've removed yourself from the game. And without you playing, the narcissist has no one left to win against, no one left to fool, no one left to break. This is where the tables turn. This is the beginning of their unraveling. But more importantly, this is the beginning of your freedom. Keep watching, because what happens next inside the narcissist's mind will not only surprise you, it will show you just how powerful you really are. Narcissists don't live in reality. They live in a carefully crafted illusion, one where they're always admired, always right, always in control. They build this mental palace, brick by brick, out of lies, ego, and manipulation. And anyone who steps into their world is expected to play a role. You're not seen as a whole person. You're seen as a mirror, a reflection of what they want to believe about themselves. And when you no longer reflect what they want to see, they try to shatter you. Their world is built on superiority, but it's fueled by fear. Deep down, they are terrified of being exposed, of being ordinary, of being unimportant. That's why they hide behind charm. That's why they wear masks. That's why they lie without blinking. Because if someone truly saw the emptiness underneath, their entire identity would collapse. They don't want love. They want control. They don't want connection. They want power over your emotions. They study your wounds, your fears, your desires, and they use them against you. Not because they're strong, but because they're weak. A narcissist will often confuse attention with affection. They mistake control for love. When you cry, they don't feel empathy. They feel success. Your pain tells them they still matter. Your confusion feeds their ego. Your loyalty becomes their favorite weapon. But the moment you stop reacting, the illusion starts to flicker. That's when panic sets in. Because without your responses, their identity begins to blur. You were never supposed to wake up. You were never supposed to see the game. But now that you have, everything changes. That illusion they built, it starts to shake. Their throne, their crown, their kingdom of control, it doesn't feel so stable anymore. Because your clarity is their crisis. Your distance is their downfall. When you step out of the fog, they're left standing in it alone. And they hate being alone with their own thoughts. Narcissists spend their lives running from the truth. That's why they rewrite stories, why they project their guilt, why they blame everyone else for their damage. But once you leave, they're forced to confront the one thing they've always avoided themselves. And they don't like what they see. Because without someone to manipulate, they're just a person with a mask and no audience. And for a narcissist, that's unbearable. You see, this isn't just about you walking away. This is about what your strength reveals. It reveals the weakness they've buried under years of pretending. It reveals that the power they thought they had was never real. It only existed because you gave it to them. And now you've taken it back, not with revenge, not with rage, but with peace. And that kind of peace, it terrifies them because it means they no longer matter. And for someone who's spent their entire life trying to matter more than anyone else, that's the deepest cut of all. This is where their illusion begins to fall apart. This is where your absence becomes the truth they can't escape. When someone they thought they owned walks away, the narcissist world begins to fracture. Not in front of everyone, of course. On the surface, they'll pretend nothing happened. They'll wear a smile, post something bold, act like they never cared. But that's the lie. Inside, they're unraveling. Because narcissists don't understand how someone could leave without begging, without chasing, without falling apart. It doesn't fit their script. It doesn't match the fantasy where they're always the one in control. What breaks them is not just the loss of a person. It's the collapse of their illusion of dominance. Because the truth is, they didn't believe you had the courage to go. They believed their manipulation worked. That the emotional cage they built around you was strong enough to keep you there. But now you've walked right through it. You didn't scream, you didn't explain, you just left. And in doing so, you destroyed their illusion of power. They'll try to act calm, but the panic is already there. They may throw themselves into distractions, new people, louder voices, bigger masks. But deep down, they're spiraling. Because they can't process the reality that they were not enough to keep you. And worse, that you were strong enough to walk away. This isn't just rejection. This is exposure. Because now they have to face what they've always buried. The fact that they're not invincible. The confusion that sets in is unbearable for them. Narcissists build their identity on the reactions of others. They feed on attention, even if it's negative. But when you go silent, when you choose peace, you cut off the supply. And without that, they lose their sense of self. They start asking questions not because they want answers, but because they can't stand the silence. Why didn't you beg? Why didn't you fight? Why are you not broken like before? That silence echoes through their mind like thunder. It haunts them. Because they know something now they didn't believe before. You saw through them. You saw the patterns. You felt the lies. You finally realized that love doesn't look like pain. And in choosing yourself, you did the one thing they never wanted. You stopped needing them. They may try to come back, not out of love, out of desperation. They need to know they still have power, that they can still pull you back in, that their control is still alive. But you already know the truth. You've outgrown the lies. You've outgrown the cycle. And your silence is now louder than anything they could say. This is the turning point. The mask is slipping. The game is failing. And for the first time, they're left facing the reality they never prepared for. A life without control over you. And it terrifies them. Because no distraction, no new person, no fake strength can replace the power they once had over your mind. This is where their foundation starts to crumble. This is where the panic becomes real. Behind closed doors, the breakdown begins. The narcissist who once appeared so composed now battles a storm inside. Their thoughts become chaotic, restless, panicked. Not because they lost someone they loved, but because they lost someone they controlled. That's the difference. Love brings sadness, but control when lost brings collapse. And this collapse doesn't happen in an instant. It starts slowly. A sense of confusion, a wave of anxiety, an unfamiliar silence that feels like suffocation. They begin to obsess, checking your posts, asking about you in subtle ways, replaying old conversations in their mind. But it's not because they miss who you are. It's because they need to prove to themselves that they still have access, that they can still affect you, that they're not forgotten. Because the idea that you've moved on without them, without falling apart, it makes them feel irrelevant. And for a narcissist, irrelevance is death to the ego. They may send a message, a casual, "How have you been?" A reminder of an inside joke, a picture from the past. They're not reaching out for closure, they're testing. Trying to see if the door is still open. Trying to see if they still hold space in your mind. If you respond, they'll take it as a sign that they still matter, that the power hasn't fully slipped away. But if you don't, the real mental break begins. Now, the anger sets in. They can't handle rejection. It's not just painful, it's humiliating. Because deep down, they believe they're superior, that no one should ever walk away from them, especially not without regret. So if kindness doesn't pull you back, they'll try cruelty, blame, insults, lies. They'll twist stories to make themselves the victim. They'll try to provoke a reaction, any reaction. Because in their mind, if they can't control your love, they'll settle for controlling your pain. But you're no longer in the game, and that's what destroys them. You've disconnected from their pattern. You've stopped responding to their bait. You've broken the cycle that once kept you in place. And now they're left shouting into silence, a silence they once used against you, now echoing back at them. Psychologically, narcissists depend on what's called narcissistic supply. Attention, praise, drama, control. Without it, their sense of self begins to deteriorate. It's like a drug they can't live without, and you were one of their strongest sources. Not because you were weak, but because you cared deeply. That care gave them energy. But now you've redirected that energy back to yourself, and they feel it like a loss, a deep, aching void they can't fill, no matter how hard they try. They'll wear the mask even tighter in public. They pretend to thrive. But the truth is, when no one's watching, they spiral. They're haunted by the reality that you've tasted freedom. And once someone tastes freedom, they rarely come back to the cage. That's why they unravel. That's why the cracks turn into collapse. Not because you left, but because you've shown them what it looks like when someone truly wakes up. This is the moment when the break deepens. This is where their control begins to dissolve completely. There is nothing more powerful than silence after chaos. When you stop explaining, stop defending, stop reacting, the dynamic shifts completely. Because narcissists feed on noise, they thrive in confusion. But silence is foreign to them. It's not just absence, it's a message. A message that says, you no longer have access to me. And that message echoes louder than any confrontation ever could. They don't break when you cry. They don't break when you beg. In fact, that's when they feel the strongest, when they know they've gotten inside your head. But when you disappear quietly, without drama, without warning, they start to panic. Because that kind of silence tells them everything they don't want to believe. It tells them you've healed. It tells them you've detached. And more than anything, it tells them they've lost their grip on your emotions. Narcissists need to be needed. That's their entire identity. They want to feel irreplaceable. They want to be the reason behind your highs and lows. But when you remove them from your life, without apology, without explanation, they realize they never held the power they thought they did. And that's what destroys them. You see, your peace becomes their punishment. Your growth becomes their mirror. And they hate mirrors that show the truth. The beauty of silence is that it doesn't need defense. It doesn't need to be justified. It simply exists. And in its existence, it forces the narcissist to face the one thing they can't handle. Being irrelevant, they might lash out. They might start rumors. They might try to provoke a reaction through others. But all of it is just noise, desperate noise, hoping to pull you back into their chaos. Don't go. Stay silent. Stay centered. That silence is your shield, and it's stronger than anything they can throw. There's a deep psychological shift that happens when you stop responding to dysfunction. It's the moment your mind says, I choose peace over chaos. I choose clarity over confusion. I choose me. That choice reprograms your nervous system. It begins to heal the parts of you that once felt addicted to the drama. Because when someone manipulates your emotions long enough, you start to believe that love must come with pain. But real love doesn't drain, it doesn't hurt. And your silence proves that you finally know the difference. You start to rebuild slowly, quietly, powerfully, without asking for permission, without seeking closure from the person who broke you. Because now you understand they were never going to give you closure. They were only going to keep reopening the wound. But silence is your closure. Silence is your answer. Silence is your freedom. And here's the truth. Once you give yourself that kind of peace, you'll never trade it again for chaos. You'll never sacrifice your mental clarity just to keep someone who was never meant to stay. And that's what breaks the narcissist. Not your anger, not your revenge, but your indifference. The way you no longer look back, the way your life begins to glow without them. Because to them, being forgotten is worse than being hated. This is where your silence becomes your voice. This is where your stillness becomes your strength. There comes a moment after the silence, after the storm, when something inside you begins to shift. It's quiet, almost unnoticeable at first, but then it grows, stronger, clearer. It's the return of your voice, not the one that begged or apologized, the one that finally says, I matter. That shift is what the narcissist never counted on. They thought breaking you would be permanent. They thought once they dimmed your light, it would never shine again. But they underestimated the one thing they could never control, your healing. Healing after a narcissist isn't just about moving on. It's about rising from something that tried to erase you. It's the moment you stop searching for answers in their behavior and start finding strength in your own. The moment you realize the silence wasn't just a weapon. It was a sanctuary, a place where your mind could breathe again. A place where you stopped trying to fix someone who was never willing to be honest. And in that space, you found clarity. You saw the patterns. You saw the lies. But more importantly, you saw your own worth. You begin to walk differently. Think differently. You're no longer reactive. You don't need to defend your boundaries. They speak for themselves. You don't chase closure. It lives within you. The trauma begins to lose its grip. The anxiety fades. The self-doubt quiets. And in its place grows something unshakable, self-trust. That's the foundation narcissists tried to destroy. But now it's what keeps you steady. Because once you start trusting yourself, no manipulation can reach you. You stop hoping they'll change. You stop replaying the arguments. You stop needing them to understand your pain. Because now their validation no longer feeds you. You've built your own nourishment. From self-respect, from peace, from the quiet strength of walking away and never turning back. You've outgrown the chaos, and now you recognize the cost of staying in it. You finally see that love should never feel like survival. This is the version of you they never wanted to see. The one who doesn't react, the one who doesn't return, the one who doesn't explain why they've grown. You've evolved into someone they no longer recognize. Someone too strong to be fooled, too wise to be baited, too healed to be hurt by their games. And that truth burns them quietly. Not because they love you, but because they've lost the ability to control you. What they called too sensitive is now your intuition. What they mocked as crazy is now your wisdom. What they tried to break has become your greatest strength. And now, you walk with the kind of calm that only comes from surviving something that almost destroyed you. That's power. Not in noise, not in revenge, but in peace, unbothered, clear, whole. This is what healing looks like. This is what growth sounds like. And this is where your freedom becomes louder than their control ever was. Walking away doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you cold. It doesn't mean you gave up. It means you finally remembered who you are. It means you chose to protect your peace over their chaos. You stopped sacrificing your mental health just to keep the illusion of connection alive. You stopped confusing pain with love, and you began to understand that real strength isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet, it's steady, it's the moment you decide to stop explaining your worth to someone committed to misunderstanding it. The narcissist will feel your absence in ways they never expected. They thought you'd come back. They thought time would weaken your resolve. They believed you still needed something from them. But you didn't leave to get attention. You left to get clarity. You walked away not out of hate, but out of self-respect. And that decision broke the script they were used to. Because narcissists aren't used to people walking away with dignity. They're used to people crawling, begging, explaining. You did none of that. And that silence became a storm they couldn't control. There's something deeply empowering about choosing yourself after being conditioned to doubt your own mind. You begin to trust your instincts again. You stop second-guessing your memories. You realize that peace was always an option. You just had to stop expecting it from the one who created the chaos. And once you stop expecting closure from the person who hurt you, you set yourself free. You realize closure was never theirs to give. It was always yours to create. You wake up lighter. You breathe deeper. You smile without forcing it. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer carrying the weight of someone else's dysfunction. You're no longer responsible for fixing what you didn't break. You no longer apologize for taking up space, for having needs, for being human. That's the kind of healing that stays. That's the kind of healing that rewires your life. And the narcissists, they're left in the prison they built, still looking for someone to blame, still chasing control, still wearing the mask. But masks get heavy and illusions always crack. Eventually, their world begins to collapse under the weight of their own emptiness. And the one person who could have truly loved them, the one they pushed away, has already walked into a new life. A life built on truth, not fear, on peace, not power. This is the moment you realize your story didn't end when they left. It began when you did. It began the moment you stopped waiting for them to change and started becoming who you were always meant to be. Strong, grounded, whole. You didn't just survive them, you outgrew them. And now your life is the proof. Let them break. Let them spiral. Let them sit with the silence they once used as punishment. Because now it's your silence that speaks, not out of bitterness, but out of freedom. You don't owe them a reaction. You don't owe them a return. You owe yourself peace. And now you have it. This is the final break in their illusion. This is where your freedom begins forever.